it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I am back with another book haul. I'm not gonna bore you with a long intro as to why I've been buying a lot of books. I've just been buying a lot of books, indie bookstores, the whole shenanigans. There's just so many book releases coming out that are already out that I just need to buy, and I'm happy to support the authors and the stores I love by buying them. So here we are, another book haul. Before I dive into the books themselves, I did want to give a shout out to this video's sponsor, which is Book of the Month. As you guys know, I have worked with Book of the Month a very long time, but back in June, I did actually suspend my partnership with them. I mentioned and went into great detail as to why in that video. I also mentioned in that video that they had released a statement, and I was actually pleased with a lot of the next steps that they were going to be taking as a company to ensure that their selections were more diverse moving forward. Since then, I have been evaluating their monthly selections, and I've really loved a lot of the books they have come out with. To be very clear and transparent, this will be a partnership I'll be taking month to month, and I'll be evaluating all the selections before deciding if I want to move forward, but I'm excited to support them if they continue to prioritize not only diverse genres and book releases, but also supporting a diverse set of voices and authors that they select every month. And I'm not exaggerating when I say their September releases look exceptional, and I'm really excited about all of them. But before I jump into the titles themselves, a quick overview of the service if you're not familiar. Book of the Month is an online subscription service that allows you to get new release hardcover books sent right to your door at a really affordable price of $14.99. You can easily skip a month if you're not interested in any of the titles, and you can add up to 2 extra books at $9.99 each. The book selections are always really amazing, and again, they always run the gamut of a lot of different genres. I have found some really amazing books through this service, and if you use the code SOGOOD, you can get your first book for only $9.99. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the books for this month. The first book is Winter Counts, which is a thriller novel set on a native reservation in South Dakota. This book sounds incredibly gripping, one that'll definitely be a page turner. It follows our main character Virgil, who is a local enforcer, and when an incident occurs, he's actually hired because the American legal system and the tribal council both failed to kind of act and pursue justice for this incident. So begins Virgil's investigation and try to piece together elements of this crime. The synopsis is very vague as to exactly what is going on, which I think is definitely to its benefit given that it is a thriller element, but it also says that as Virgil starts to link pieces together, he must also face his own demons and reclaim his native identity. This sounds really gripping, really intriguing, and I honestly think a really good book to pick up in the fall winter. It tends to be the time of year when I personally love to read thrillers, so definitely excited to have this on my shelf. Next book just is like a title of my life, and that is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I've actually never read a book by Fredrik Backman, which is wild because I feel like he's, generally speaking, one of the most beloved authors. He writes charming and lovely stories following all sorts of different types of people, and I just hear they're very compelling and lovely to read. So his new release definitely appeals to me in that way, and honestly, I just really want to pick up a book by this author. The overall synopsis of this also sounds peculiar in the best way, and essentially follows a crime that never actually took place, a would-be bank robber, and 8 very anxious people that all of a sudden become tied together in this story. It sounds funny and witty, and I love a story that kind of follows lots of different threads of people's lives and how they're ultimately connected and brought together. And also this would-be almost bank robbery. Definitely want to learn more about that as well. So again, Fredrik Backman I feel like is a lighthearted type of author, and I really need to pick up his books, and I'm excited to have this and check it out soon. Next book is another really highly anticipated novel for myself, and that is Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. This is the much-anticipated sophomore novel by this author after a release of her first novel, Homegoing, which was widely acclaimed, very beloved, and this book sounds equally as compelling and heart-wrenching. This essentially follows our main character Gifty, who is currently enrolled in the PhD program at Stanford to study neuroscience. She immigrated with her family to America at a young age from Ghana, and essentially they have since been kind of stricken with unimaginable tragedy. Her brother died tragically from a drug overdose. Her mother is currently depressed and unable to leave her bed, and our main character Gifty kind of turns to science to try to uncover why this is happening and try to also find a solution. This is said to take a deep look at race within America, also about a woman trying to reckon with generational trauma. This is a book I know myself and many others are really excited to pick up. I've heard excellent things about this author. I'm thrilled to have this in my hands, and I also feel like I'll be reading this soon. The cover is also really stunning in its simplicity. I just also felt like I needed to call that out. The next book is The Last Story of Mina Lee. It's said to be a deep and poignant look not only at a relationship between a mother and a daughter, but also said to illustrate the devastating reality of being an immigrant in America. This follows both Margot and Mina. Mina is the mother of Margot and emigrated to America from Korea in her early 20s. At the beginning of the story, Margot is confused why her mother is not returning her phone calls and goes to visit her mother at her apartment, only to find her to have suspiciously passed away. Margot then begins to kind of dive into her mother's past, kind of trying to pull all these invisible strings, not only to piece together what has happened, but also to learn more about her mother and her life. This story and the search of Margot trying to uncover her mother's past is paralleled with Mina's story of immigrating to America and her first year actually living in LA, kind of trying to find her place and possibly falling in love. Again, this is said to be an intimate story of a mother and a daughter. This sounds both devastating and beautiful, and one that I'm, again, also excited to have on my shelves. I wasn't kidding when I said I was really excited about the titles this month. The last book I'm gonna show off is another book I've only heard incredible things about, and one that has been kind of lauded as a must-read for everyone, and that is Caste: The Origins of Our Discontent. And this, I'm honestly just gonna read a section of the blurbs. I think it just describes it best. Is a brilliant book where the author gives us a masterful portrait of an unseen phenomenon in America as she explores through an immersive, deeply researched narrative and stories about real people, how America today and throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human ranking. Beyond looking at the modern structures within American society, she also looks at history as well as other cultures and countries as well as influences for this book. But yes, this is said to be eye-opening and revealing and said to kind of re-examine what we know about America and kind of what actually lies beneath American society. This is one I definitely hope to get to in the next couple of months. I hope to try to get my hands on the audiobook to read along just to make sure everything is permeating my brain. But yes, this is the last book for the September selections from Book of the Month. All right, those are all of the Book of the Month titles. I will have the coupon code and a link down below if you guys are interested in learning more. And now let's move on to the rest of the books I have picked up this month because there are many. The first book I'm going to talk about is a highly anticipated release. I'm so excited to have it, and that is The Memory of Babel by Christelle Davos. This is book 3 to the Mirror Visitors series, which is one of my all-time favorite YA fantasy series. It is so original, so unique, and I love the first two, so I hope you're reading this. I hope to be picking this book up this month as well. But this follows our main character, Ophelia, who has a set of unusual powers. She can travel through mirrors, and she can touch objects and kind of see their entire history and past. In the first one, she is essentially married off to a far away spire. Yes, this world has like floating spires in the sky, and she travels there to meet her new husband despite the fact she has no interest in getting married. The politics in this new spire are incredibly cutthroat. I would describe like Versailles meets Russian court politics. It's also desolate and cold, and everyone uses glamours to try to trick people into seeing things that aren't actually there. It is magnificent. It has so much vivid imagery. I love every second about the first two books, and I'm really excited to see how the story continues into book 3. So yes, pumped to have this. I love how they're also illustrated. These books are just everything. Next is another very anticipated release, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is a queer YA fantasy love story that just sounds so charming, and I've heard amazing things about this from every early reviewer out there. But this follows our main character, Yadriel, whose family is having a hard time accepting his gender. So to prove that he is a real brujo, him and his best friend and cousin decide to summon a family ghost from the dead and basically try to solve that mystery and put this ghost to rest. However, he accidentally summons the wrong ghost and instead summons the resident school bad boy, Julian Diaz, who has no interest in leaving Yadriel alone. He wants to know why he's dead, and the boys inexplicably become drawn to each other and closer. I hear this book is full of charm and adventure and romance, and I've heard such lovely things about it. This also feels like a perfect fall read given the ghost reality of it all. I'm pumped. It's finally out in my hands. The next book I picked up, the synopsis is just singing to me, and that is Ray Bear. I believe this either has like a love to hate or a love to friendship element at its core, and the synopsis is just so intriguing to me. It follows our main character Tarisai, who is raised in a very remote area, and the only person she really knows is her mother, who is called the Lady. She's been raised for essentially one task and purpose, and that is to eventually travel to the heart of the kingdom, try to get on this very powerful council, and once she does and gains everyone's trust, to then kill kill the crown prince whom she's supposed to serve. However, when she accomplishes this task, she finds herself actually very drawn to the crown prince. So now she has to reconcile with the path that she must take. Is she supposed to follow what her mother wants, or is she going to choose a different path for herself? I won't lie, this sort of trope and setup within fantasy always sings to me. I read it, I want to get it immediately. I also just sort of love this carving one's own path and destiny, kind of fighting against what you've been raised to do is always something I really appreciate from a narrative perspective as well. Early reviews, very strong. This came out in August, so had to pick this up. I will hopefully be reading this soon, though my TBR is forever long, but I really am excited about this one. Next is a much anticipated new release, and that is Vicious Spirits. And this is the sequel to Wicked Fox, which I read last year and loved so much. This is a series I would kind of describe as like if a K-drama met anime, turned Twilight on its head. Like, it's extremely dramatic, but in the most entertaining way that will just keep you flipping the pages and will just like also just suck you into the story itself. But I think you have to kind of know going in structurally what kind of story it's going to be, and that is one that it's all about plot twists and like wild things happening, but it's so entertaining because of it. This is a story where we follow two characters, one of which is half a guamo and half human, and as a guamo she essentially like sucks the souls out of living humans, and she has lived with her mother and kind of has always isolated herself from humanity her whole life. But one day she meets a boy, and this boy is the other perspective we follow, and he basically falls head over heels for this girl. That's why I kind of related to Twilight, but like changed, because the girl is sort of this soul-sucking vampire-esque character and the boy is sort of chasing after her despite this. It's a really interesting story. It has lots of action. It's rooted in a lot of Korean folklore. There's a lot of family elements and food, and again, it's so entertaining. I flew through the first one. I read it in like one day, and I was highly anticipating this sequel, so pumped to have this. Was a pre-order, and now it's here. Next up is a book I picked up, which is Race to the Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. It's part of the Rick Riordan Presents, which if you're not familiar are essentially Own Voices mythology middle grade series, which I have read many of and loved so many of. It's well known I'm a big fan of middle grade, but I'm particularly been obsessed with these Rick Riordan Presents because one, I have been learning a lot about different cultures and mythologies, and two, I just love adventure and a good time. It's a story we follow our main character Nozomi and her brother Mac, and Nozomi has always been able to detect monsters, and at the beginning of the story Nozomi encounters this man who she detects as a monster who's actually her father's boss at the oil and gas company, and she begins to get concerned once he gets increasingly interested not only in their Navajo heritage as well as his increasing interest into the legend of the hero twins. Nozomi knows he's a threat, but unfortunately her father doesn't believe her. But when her father mysteriously disappears the next day, leaving a note that just says run, her and her brother as well as their best friend go on a mission to try to save their father. To do this, they have to partake in a bunch of trials to get help. Again, this just sounds like an imaginative and adventurous middle grade story. I've been wanting to check out books by Rebecca Roanhorse, and I will be reading other books by her as well. I have one pre-order that's coming out later this year, but I thought this one really spoke to me because I love middle grade adventure, so I'm excited to add this to my shelf as well. I have two books that were sent to me by Simon & Schuster, and that is first The Red Scroll of Magic and The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. These are like side stories, I think, that are following Magnus Bane, which I love Magnus Bane, so I'm excited about a possible other stories that follow him. I'm not sure if these are actually short stories following Magnus and Alec, I think, as they live in Paris, kind of set between the two different series, but yeah. These sound fun. If I need a pick-me-up, a Cassandra Clare pick-me-up, I now have these on my shelf, which I'm grateful for. So big shout out to Simon & Schuster for sending these my way. I will never tire of a Shadowhunters moment. Next book is a long-awaited sequel for myself, and that is The Heart of the Flames by Nikki Powell Preto. This is the sequel to Crown of Feathers, which I read last year and honestly feel like is one of the most underrated YA fantasy series out there. I don't see a lot of people talking about it, but it's so good. It's a YA fantasy multi-perspective story following first two sisters who essentially are very much at odds at each other. I would say they are opposites, almost to an extreme sort of deadly way. They essentially come from a long line of Phoenix warriors that have since been very oppressed within this fantasy world and kind of killed off by the now ruling political body. At the beginning of the story, both girls are on a quest to try to hatch a phoenix to help reclaim their power back. There's some complications in this and kind of tearing the two sisters apart and their destinies apart. We follow one as they kind of join a group of Phoenix writers and the other as they try to enact their revenge. There's also a prince involved and some hiding in plain sight. It was such a good first book. I loved every second of it. I'm really excited to see how the story plays out in the second one, which is rather chunky. I actually think I'm gonna reread Crown of Feathers and then jump into this sometime soon. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. The Phoenix magic was awesome. The sisterly conflict, amazing. So I'm excited to have the sequel and add it to my long list of books I need to reread, because, you know, that's also a thing. Next book I have to show off, I just generally have to give a shout out to Instagram and YouTube for talking so much about it, and then me finding out about it through that, and that is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This, I believe, is like a romance-focused fantasy novel, so I think it's like very romance-centered, but in a fantasy setting, which appeals to me at every sense of the word. I didn't even know this was a thing. I mean, I kind of knew it was a thing because Sarah J. Maas books are pretty romance-centric, but I think this is like romance in a fantasy setting, and I was like, yes, please. Obviously, I've read a lot of romance this year and really enjoyed it, so I was excited about this prospect. I actually have read quite a few Jennifer L. Armentrout books and really liked them, so I honestly don't really know too much about this. I'm assuming, yeah, a maiden, a duty, a kingdom, so I'm guessing some sort of girl who has a destiny she must fulfill, some sort of probably soldier who will need to protect her is my guess, and then a kingdom, kind of like tearing them apart. I don't even know if that's accurate. Let me read the synopsis to make sure. Yep, I was 100% right, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm here for every single second of it. So yeah, I am thrilled to have this. I can't wait to read it. I feel like it's gonna be so entertaining. I think it's gonna be a great time. And I think the sequel's coming out very soon as well, so I bought this and I'm pumped for it. I think I'm gonna try to do a reading vlog for this as well. TBD though. And the last book I picked up is a work of nonfiction, and that is The Inconvenient, I'm gonna say native here, and this is by Thomas King. This is a work of nonfiction, and Thomas King is a very well-known and beloved author, specifically known for his writing in terms of indigenous and native experience. I'm personally trying to continue and also expand my nonfiction reading that I've been really focusing on over the past 4 or 5 months. But this is specifically supposed to be a curious account of Native people in North America, and I think it's looking at specific historical events, but kind of reworking the perspective from actually the indigenous and native people impacted by these historic events. I hear Thomas King is ruthlessly honest and at times humorous throughout this. And I do plan to read more works by Thomas King, but I thought I would start here. But yeah, I did pick this up and I plan to read this in the next month or so, definitely on my incoming TBR for my nonfiction reading as well. So I did grab this. Alrighty guys, those are all the books I picked up in the month of September. Let me know down below some books you've gotten recently, as I would love to know, and I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.